Okay, if you don't already open up your Bibles to John chapter 1, we're going to look at verses 14 to 18 here in just a moment. But since Mick brought it up, on the radio program, it's a podcast. It's a 27-minute radio program, and they automatically put it into a podcast. And I rarely go on that site, just because of doing so many other things. And there was one time when I did the book of Revelation when we were doing the class. I did one chapter per episode, and I labeled the Revelation episodes on there just so a few people had asked for it, and I sent that to them. But yeah, last year, 2021, was 1,674, and the number 2 download was for the whole series of Revelation 600 times of those 1,600. And that's never pushing it. We never advertise it. That's just people organically finding that somehow. And then this year, so we're 4 years removed from the book of Revelation. We've already had 373 views or downloads from all the programs. And the book of Revelation, all those series are still the number 1 download, probably because they're labeled and categorized. And we're not even trying to put that out there. So I'm hoping I can put more effort into that. We think that if by properly putting it together, labeling everything, and doing the metadata, that we'll be able to triple those numbers, get those out there. We're also working on a phone app for the church, for not just the videos, but the radio program and other things as well. So pray for that maybe that'll be fruitful, and that will go well. Okay, Acts chapter 1. We're going to look at verses 14 to 18. And we're in what you could call the final section or aspect of John's theological statement. As we were saying during the Pew Packers, here he is putting forth his conclusion of who John is, all through this, of who his identity is. We already know that Jesus is the Word, or the Word is God. And that is Jesus. He is the creator of all things, is the Word, the source of all life. He is the light of man. John the Baptizer came and gave a testimony to the truthfulness of this. Some may have confessed the baptizer as being the Christ. They were confused by that. Not all accepted Jesus. Some from the world, many from the Jews. But those who did believe, he gave the right to become children of God. And so now we come to what many call the most remarkable aspect of the theological statement from John. And John, I think, is revealing to us the central fact of Christianity. And it's right here in this very first verse, verse 14, he writes, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth." When you stop and think about what he's saying, just in that first part, "and the Word became flesh," he's described for us who the Word is already. The Word was in the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word, what? Was God. And then all things were created through him, the Word. It has always been there. And now, verse 14, the Word became flesh. Obviously, a human being. And dwelt among us. Anyone have a different word rather than dwelt? Yeah, that's the literal translation of that word. It's tented or tabernacled. What do you think of when you hear that, tabernacled with us? Huh? He camped. Okay. What else? Anyone think of the book of Exodus, maybe? You know, the tabernacle, that temporary temple tabernacle that God had Moses build, and they would take it around with them. And when the Israelites looked upon that, what did they think of? Who was there? God dwelt there. But now, he dwells where? Huh? Among us. In Jesus. He's here in the flesh. So he tented among us. And we saw his glory. The we is going to include John the Apostle and the others. and many others other than the apostles, they saw the Word, Jesus' glory. What is glory? Okay, yeah, it's a radiance. It's all that shines forth. And when you're talking about divinity, it's all the attributes of him. Think about all the times in the Gospels where people reference Jesus in an amazing way. Like at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, what did they say about Jesus that would be showing his glory? He speaks as like one with what? Authority. That's right. And others, when they would come to, I think, arrest Jesus, they didn't because of the way he spoke. He had a certain presence about him. They recognized there's something about Jesus. And they saw all these attributes. He was sinless. He did everything perfectly. That's his glory shining forth. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father. All right, glory. So he's talking about that as of the only begotten. Anyone else have a different translation other than begotten there? Okay, that is literally begotten is a unique, one of a kind. So I know when you think of begotten, you think of someone born, but the Greek word is it's unique. It's the word for uniqueness. He's a one of a kind. There's no other human being on the face of the planet like him. He is different from the Father, full of grace and truth. Okay, we're going to see those two terms come up again later on, but let's talk about those. What is grace? Unmerited favor. And Jesus is full of it. He's full of it. If he's full of it, that means he has an abundance that he can give out. And he's also full of what? Truth. And he's not talking about facts and figures of types of truth, but genuineness. The genuine article. He is who he claims to be. This is the Son of God. And then we come down here to verse 15. And we're getting into the evidence here for the Word becoming flesh. Not only did they behold him and they saw him and the glory and all that is of him, but even John the baptizer gave testimony about him. John testified about him and cried out saying, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me has a higher rank than I, for he existed before me." So even John, even though people were confused about who John the Baptizer was, remember they thought he was the Christ, and they questioned him about that several times. But he even claimed that there's one coming who's higher ranked than I, and he came before me. Now, who was older, Jesus or John the Baptizer? Yeah, by how long? 6 months older. But he knows something about Jesus. He knows that he came way before John. He has a higher rank. And he gives testimony about him. He has a higher rank than he does. But he came, in other words, he came before he came. And in verse 16, here's the reason for his coming. "For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace." For of his fullness we have all received. Again, that fullness is talking about an abundance. You have a great amount of it. And in this case, it's God's salvation imparted to us. So in this incarnate Word, the entire fullness of divine grace and love all became actively present among us. And it was love. Because here is God coming among us sinners and all the problems and issues that arise from that. And he doesn't destroy us. And he came into that temple and saw what they were doing in that temple and didn't just take them out or end everything when they put him on the cross. That is love for us. And he was full of that. And praise to God for that, because we needed it. And out of that fullness that we have received, we have nothing. We have nothing. We stand in need, and Christ has this in an inexhaustible abundance. He is the giver, and we are the recipients. And what we have received is grace upon grace. Now, there's two ways to look at this, on grace upon grace. This might mean that his grace never runs out. It kind of goes along with the theme that we're seeing from that, the great abundance, the fullness of it. So it could have the concept that as the days come and go, there's always a new supply. Hendrickson, in his commentary, and Linsky as well, they explain it like this. It is like the waves of the seashore. Wave upon wave continually comes in to wash the shoreline. And so that seems to fit, and it makes sense. And that concept is true. I think it means the second one. I think it fits the context as we get down into verse 17 a little better. I think it refers to the fact that Jesus brought a new system from God. Moses brought the law, which was once God's arrangement for bringing sinful man into a holy relationship with him. But now Jesus has brought something new, and this new arrangement for bringing sinful man into that relationship. So I think John might be saying here that while God's grace was certainly exhibited under the old Mosaic system, and let me ask you, was it? When you look, now that we looked at Exodus and Genesis, and we think about the law, was that grace from God? Absolutely. Anything that doesn't require our death is grace. And so that was grace. And now we have this greater expression of grace found in the person of Jesus. And both systems are based on grace. So it's grace upon grace. And that's the way I see it. And it could be either one of those, though. But, think about that. And also note another thing here I think is interesting. So the law, we're in verse 17. The law, verse 17, was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. Again, were realized literally means come to be. So New American Standard, it's the only place you find where it is wrong on its translation. But I don't know why they went with were realized, but it means come to be, and it's a contrast from the law through Moses. How was the law? How did it come through Moses? It was given. But then next, grace and truth came to be through Jesus. You see the difference? One was given, one came. And that's the two parts of grace. Grace was given through Moses. The other one came to us in the person of Christ and then died on that cross for you and me. So you can see this is John wrapping up his conclusion about who Jesus is. And when we finish it out in verse 18, from verse 19 all the way to the end of the gospel, he is going to be providing evidence for that conclusion all the way to the end. So he's telling us right here, right off the bat, this is who Jesus is. He's not John the Baptizer. He's the Word. And he always was, and he always will be. And he came to be just like you and me, but different, unique in every way. And he is full of grace. We have seen it. He is full of the truth. We know it. And he has given grace upon grace, more than we could have possibly imagined. We thought we had it under the law. Boy, were we wrong. We really found the genuine article in the person of Christ. And these things were found to be in Jesus. Verse 18. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father, he has explained him. No man has seen God at any time. True statement. Some have come close. Can you think of a few? Moses, where at? That's right. In a few minutes at the mountain. Who else? In the cleft of the rock. That's right. That would be scary. I would have been nervous, but okay. We already went over that. Who else? How about Adam in the garden? And God walked with him. He was close. He was close. Who else? We got Abraham, right, under the oak tree. We said Moses, Isaiah in the temple. But all of these are occasions where God only allowed some physical manifestation to be seen. So because that you and I, we cannot see God, it is difficult for us to come to know him, to really know him. And yet God wants us to know him on the sense of entering into a relationship with him. So he made a provision that we might get a little closer to him by giving his word fleshly form. He once again provides that physical manifestation so that it can be seen. And the one who came in the flesh is called, in the New American Standard, the only begotten of God. This is the only place where the New American Standard got it wrong. Some translations say son, but what does that word really mean? Uniqueness in the Greek. He's unique. He's a one of a kind. There's no other like him. The only one born as a son of God. And so he has come. And this one is in the bosom of the Father. And what he's getting at there, again, as we've mentioned this, I think, last week, John is trying to use terminology that shows the intimacy between the Son and the Father, just how close they are. They are close. They are intimate. They are one in the same. They are the Son and the Father. If one is God, so is the other. They are the same. One, he is not under him. They are the same. And that's what John is really hitting on hard in these first 18 verses. And there's another word there. Which one was? Oh, yeah. He has explained him. I like this one because of the Greek word used for explained is the word where we get our English word exegesis. Anybody know what exegesis means? Yeah, it's when you're studying the Bible, well, one of the jobs of the preacher or the teacher is to dive into the text, to figure out what did the author want his readers of that day to see and understand. And then when we gather that information, we put it all together, then we expose that, we espouse that in a lesson. That's expository preaching. We bring it out. And it's exegesis. So Jesus is exegeting the Father. He is explaining him. How does he do that? Yeah, okay, yeah. It is with grace and truth. If you have seen me, he said, you have seen the Father. So these few verses of 14 to 18 have a lot in them. And I'm just zipping through this really fast. But there's a lot there. We could spend a whole day on each verse, diving into it and going through the Gospel of John, showing how he is showing the evidence of these things. So these first 18 verses in the Gospel of John is John giving his conclusion. He's starting off with that. He's saying, here is who Jesus really is. And now I'm going to prove it all throughout the rest of my writing. He's going to start in verse 19. And it's interesting the way he starts that, and we'll look at that next week. But I want us to do that. We're going to examine the gospel and a setup of evidences that John presents all the way to the end. And if we have time at the end of each one, we're going to come back to chapter 1 and make those connections and those applications. Any comments or questions on verses 14 to 18? Why'd you look up there? You know, Chris is almost done. I've exposed the truth. No comments, no questions? All right. I love this passage, and I thought about maybe going over it again next week, but I think I'm just going to move on. But I want you to see that, though, verses 14 to 18, this is the conclusionary remarks there. He's bringing home what he wants his readers to see. And if you're if you're in college or in high school, this is how you write your paper, right? You start off with a thesis statement, and then you go out to prove that, and then you restate it at the end. and everything in between ought to prove what you started out with. And that's what John's doing. See, here it is. This is what I believe, and now I'm going to prove it. And he's going to show us that throughout the rest of the gospel.